Welcome to the Go Slow to Go Fast Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Kendra Chapman, caffeine lover, triplet mom, former school principal, and somebody who is really enjoying this 51st year on this planet. So if this is your first time being here, thank you for listening and watching and joining us for this conversation today. This is a very special episode, not only because of the conversation you're about to hear, but it also marks our 100th episode of the Go Slow to Go Fast Lifestyle Podcast. So it's a celebration of the podcast and our 100th episode. It's also cancer season. I think it's worth saying that it is cancer season right now while we're filming this, while we are posting this in 2026. So it just feels fitting that this milestone of 100 episodes is coming at this time of the year because I am interviewing my mother, Barbara Keating Weber. And in astrology, Cancer is the sign of home, family, ancestors, ancestral roots, and the maternal lineage. So it invites us to look back in order to look forward and to move forward. We just had the solstice a couple of days ago to be thinking about what is working and not working. It's a great time to check in and kind of think, okay, we're halfway through the calendar year. How's it going? What do we want to do moving forward into the next 6 months? So it just feels especially meaningful that my guest today is my mother. She is definitely somebody who has shaped my life from the very beginning. And both sides of the family are Irish, deeply Irish. And so when you come from the old world, you're going to carry those traditions with you to the new world, right? And like many Irish families of their generation, childbirth took place at home with the support of midwives. And my mom shares this when she's recalling even the side of the family that had been in the U.S. for longer also had their children at home. So families relied on that knowledge being passed down through generations, including herbal remedies, kitchen cures, the poultices, the topical treatments from herbs and tinctures, teas, those healing practices. Doctors were called when necessary, but much of life's healing happened within the home and family. So these traditions became part of our family's story. So I see this repetitive reminder that family is important, education is important, and learning how to heal in the home with natural remedies has been something that has been passed down in my family. And so these are familiar themes that will keep coming up in this conversation. If you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, you know it's exactly what we're all about here. Going slow in a fast-paced world, choosing intention over urgency. And sometimes we need to just stop and pause and reflect on what truly matters, including the wisdom from previous generations. And that's why it just feels so appropriate to have my mom join me for the 100th episode. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay. So welcome, Mom, to the podcast. How are you?
Nice to be here. I'm fine.
This is my 100th episode of the podcast.
Well, that's wonderful. Your 100th episode. Okay.
So I asked all my guests, and my mom is Barbara Keating Weber, also known as Mom. But I'm going to ask, how do you go slow to go fast?
I don't think I'm going too slow these days, but where we live, where your dad and I live, we're retired. We don't have to be anywhere except right now, doctor appointments. So I guess we go slow to go fast. We just do what we want to do when we want to do it and enjoy life and slow down, because for 50 plus years, it was had to be here, had to be there, go, go, go. And now it's slow, slow, slow. And we enjoy that.
Like, what does it look like for you in the morning? Like when you wake up, what do you do when you first wake up?
Well, when I first wake up, I just kind of thank God that I did wake up. And I stretch, and usually your dad's already up. Like right now, I'm watching him. He's outside messing, but he gets up at like 5:30, 6 o'clock. I don't get up till 7:30, but I get up and I greet the dogs, and then I have my coffee, and then I come right to the sunroom so I can look out at those beautiful mountains. And that's how I start my day. looking at nature.
You wake up with the sun.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, Dad's already, like I say, he gets up very early, but I think he likes to have that peace and quiet for an hour without me.
So you have places outside where you can be in nature. You have
Mhm.
a sun porch for all seasons of the year that you can sit in comfortably and look at the Blue Ridge Mountains every day.
That's right. And we can look out at our birds and the bird feeders, and we'll look out and there might be some deer, turkey, and a bear on occasion. Reminds us that we're surrounded by wildlife. We've had coyote and fox and usually the dogs. We have 2 dogs. They usually let us know there's something out there. But yeah, so we're right in the throes of nature, which is opposite of where I came from. So, but it's to me, it's the best. It's the best of everything. I didn't think that initially. I thought, oh my gosh, out here in the middle of nowhere. But in the middle of nowhere is where I like it. It's quiet and
Yeah.
it gives you
So,
time to reflect. And yeah,
yeah, I mean, you grew up in a very different area, like you said. So, can you talk a little bit about what that was like in your childhood, like where you grew up and the background of the family on that side?
sure. I'm from New York and I was born in Queens, but raised on Long Island. And I think Long Island is beautiful, even though it's suburbia and it's noisy and there's a lot of people, but we had the beach, which was wonderful. And the beach was pretty much my playground. So, I mean, growing up it was very safe. I don't think it would be today, but it was for us as kids and we were outside all the time. I was thinking the other day that I don't have allergies, and I don't know if that's because I was always outside, climbing trees, playing ball. I was the youngest of 4, 2 older sisters and an older brother. And, we had our bikes. I could ride my bike to my cousin's house when I got older. It wasn't that far. I mean, it was a couple towns away, but I could ride the back street and get there. So that was a lot of fun. Once you get that freedom as a child, when you can get on that bike and you can go because my mother never said, well, she did say, you can't go here, you can't go there, you can only go here, and you'd be home by this time. I didn't have a watch, but I had to come home for lunch. That was an absolute bust. And then in the evening, I had to come home when the street lights went on. So, and I was supposed to be home by supper time, and sometimes I didn't make it, and I'd be running up the kitchen steps, and I'd see that door locked.
What? Grandma would lock you out?
Yeah, if you weren't there exactly at a certain time, you could sit on the stoop until she was ready to let you in.
So you didn't get to eat dinner then if you were late?
Oh, I did, but much, much later when she decided to let me in. That was her way of saying, you be home on time or you will suffer the consequences. So, and that happened to me more often than not, but that was all right. I used to joke and say grandma wasn't that great a cook, so I wasn't missing much. So
Yeah, and that is part of our story. We don't on that side of the family, grandma was not the best cook in the world unless she was entertaining at the holidays.
she could put on a great holiday dinner. We could never, as kids, we're like, how come we don't get this every day? Well, I know why, because those cuts of meats were more expensive. So she wasn't going to waste that on us every day. But when my grandparents came, she put on a spread. It was nice. But I had aunts. I had some aunts that were not good cooks like mom, and I had aunts that my father's sisters, and they were wonderful cooks, absolutely wonderful. So we knew what good food was. We just didn't get it very often. Not that it was my mother had iron deficiencies and she had pernicious anemia. And there were certain foods the doctor told her she had to eat, which were not foods that kids liked. Like I didn't. Liver, kidneys, and some awful meats, but that's what she fixed. But she had some things that she fixed pretty well. And so it wasn't all.
Yeah. So you grew up in a house but you were pretty much used to that suburban lifestyle. Although you were born in Queens, you lived in a neighborhood on Long Island for most of your life.
Yes, I lived in a beautiful neighborhood with a very good school system, although I went to Catholic school for 8 years and I went to public school. But the school district was very good, still is. And, it was all mostly Italian, Irish, Catholic kids. We were all kind of the same. But we had a lot of fun. The When you're growing up in the 50s and the 60s, we had TV, but you learn to be innovative. Because I can remember the boys in the neighborhood, they made us all go-karts, not the kind of go-kart that you sit in, but they would take milk cartons and put steering wheels on them and put it on wheels. And those were the most fun to ride. That was before skateboards, and then skateboards came out. And so we did a lot of roller skating, a lot of ice skating. We'd go down to the lake and ice skate. So, we had I had a very good childhood
A lot of outside time.
all the time with friends, with my friends. And so, when we moved here, and it's kind of hard. You live, where you live, it's hard. You got to take your kids somewhere or bring kids in. All we had to do was open the door and yell, and off we'd go on our bikes.
Yeah, I mean, I remember you talking about Halloween and how you guys would take pillowcases out into the neighborhood all day.
We would start trick or treating. My mother would say not before noon. And sometimes Halloween was on a school day. And I know some states you don't trick or treat till the weekend, but we would, even if it was a school day, you went when you got home from school, couldn't wait to get that costume on and go. And if it was a weekend, you could go from, as my mother would say, not before noon, but then we'd go all day up until, as I got older, till dark, way past dark. And that was, a lot of fun. And it wasn't 100% safe, but it was certainly not what it is today. You wouldn't let your kids go out door to door trick or treating today.
But you were never alone. You were always with friends.
Oh, yeah. Always with a group. Always with a group. Yeah. But, the only thing you had to watch out for were the neighborhood boys throwing a sock of flour at you, hitting you with a sock full of flour that hurt.
Like on Meet Me in St. Louis with Judy Garland, with the flower thing where they would throw flour on somebody, kind of do a ring and run and throw flour on somebody.
Well, these were it was a sock, like a tube sock, and they'd fill it. I think they had rocks in there too because it was hard. And then it hurt. They'd hit you with it if they could catch you. Mean boys.
So you learned how to run fast. You learned how to run fast and ride a bike and get away.
That's
From
right.
the boys.
But, we played dodgeball. We played stickball on the streets. Of course, hide and seek, climbing trees was a lot of fun. It was just a healthy upbringing. And luckily, nothing bad ever happened.
Did grandma and grandpa ever talk about when they were little growing up in the city, in the streets and playing with friends?
Yep. Yep. My mother said that they didn't go out on Halloween. They went out the day before Thanksgiving. So it was a little different. I don't know. Or not the day before Thanksgiving, All Saints and All Souls Day. Yeah. That's when they would go out and wreak havoc. So, but my mother was born in 1915, so we're talking early 1920s.
Yeah, I think the Halloween customs have changed with the commercialization of it all. But so the Irish and the Italians would all go out, like the Catholics, they would tend to go out on All Souls Day, if you remember, if that's what grandma said. Huh.
Yeah, All
Interesting.
Souls Day. But it's basically the same thing. Or they'd go to a party and bob for apples.
Kind of like Day of the Dead in Mexico. They do all of those festivities on All Souls, basically.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay. Hmm.
So,
And I know we were going to talk about homeopathic medicine. So growing up on Long Island in a neighborhood with grandma locking the door if you weren't home in time for dinner, what are some other things that she would do when you in your childhood that you can remember that were kind of different and maybe that you've carried into this, time?
well, we never went to the doctor. My grandmother, my mother's mother, she had all of her children at home, and she would call the midwife, and if they needed the doctor, they'd call the doctor. But so my grandmother was not used to doctors, and she was a little bit fearful, I think, of hospitals and doctors. But I always joke, my grandmother had a book, it was this thick, and it had all the home remedies in it. And if we got sick, they were home remedies. We you never went to the doctor. I mean, if you went to the doctor, you were probably in really bad shape. And the only time I remember the doctor coming to the house for me one time, I guess I had the measles. At least that's what my mother said. And I was pretty sick. I had a high fever. I remember having a terrible headache and high fever. And the doctor came to the house and he gave me a shot. Now I'm a nurse and I'm thinking, what did he give me? I mean, it could have been an antibiotic, but you wouldn't give that for the measles. But anyway, I don't know what he gave me, but I remember it hurt. And I thought, and I was in bed for a long time. And then when I could go outside, my mother wouldn't let me leave the yard. I had to stay in the backyard, which I still to this day don't understand why.
They thought you were contagious.
I mean, maybe she thought I was. I wasn't. Once the rash goes, you're fine. But I remember just weeks of having to stay in the backyard, and there was nothing in my backyard to play
Maybe they
with.
didn't know the incubation period then or something. I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, so I just sat there in a chair and read. And that went on, seemed like forever. But finally, I was released. So that was, and I know one of my cousins had rheumatic fever. So she was confined to her bed for a long time. And my sister had scarlet fever when she was very young. So we had some heavy duty illnesses in the family.
And this was around the time when like polio was big and kids were having fevers, right?
Yep. Well, Jack had, of course, my brother was 10 years older than I was, so it was probably in the 40s for him. But he had gone swimming in the lake and he came home and he had a very, very high fever and it scared my mother to death. She called the doctor and it was at the height of the polio epidemic. And she called the doctor and he said, well, we'll give it, hopefully in a couple of days the fever will break. But apparently it was a little touch and go and it was scary because he had this high fever. And he was, talking out of his head and this and that, but he got over it. Oops. And he didn't have any residual from it. The doctor never said it was polio, but he said he thought it was. He thought it was some kind of paralysis because he couldn't walk either. So, but it all passed and he was all right. So that was
And
another.
how old? Do you remember how old he was then?
He was probably, he was born in 1942. So maybe eight or nine.
Before you
And
were
I
born.
I had a friend who had polio. She wore a brace for her entire life on one leg. So there were, kids but I remember taking the polio vaccine. So, maybe that's what saved me. I don't know. But it was scary. It was a scary time.
Yeah, so I can understand that. I can understand that doctors maybe not coming into the home very much and then this scare going on with kids. They probably
Well,
started thinking differently.
my mother always, our cough medicine sat on the counter. She would take onions, cut them up, put sugar over it, and then it would ferment, and you would drink the syrup. And I'm telling you, if you even had a sniffle, that knocked it right out of you. So I don't really remember having trouble with colds. And, she did a lot of, I'm sitting here looking, the only thing we had, this was in our medicine cabinet, witch hazel. You got witch hazel if you had a fever, she rubbed you down with it, or any kind of rash, mosquito bite, anything like that. Peroxide was a go-to, and then castor oil and cod liver oil, and that was about it.
Yeah. And what did she use cod liver oil for?
Well, she took it because her iron was low, I think. But she thought everybody needed, as my sister always says, yeah, she gave it to us and she gave it to our friends if they came over. She thought everybody needed cod liver oil for their blood. And then, castor oil, which also is very good for rashes and mosquito bites and things like that. And I was asking my sister because I couldn't remember. We had a little tin of salve. So if you had sunburn or if you had like a blemish or any kind of bite or rash, you would put that stuff on and it was a drawing salve. It was called, I couldn't remember the name of it, just that it started with P. So I was talking to my sister and she said, oh, that was Poslam. I said, oh, that's right, Poslam. So I put it on the internet. And what I found out is it was made in New York in a lab and they don't make it anymore. But it was funny because while I was looking for Poslam, I saw all these people asking the same thing. Why can't we get it anymore? That stuff was great. And it really was because let's say you were a teenager and you had a blemish. And you could put that on there and the next day, gone.
But you don't know what it was made of? You can't look up the
Well,
ingredients?
I did. I looked up the ingredients and it had, in fact, I ordered one of the ingredients to see the oil of cade, CADE. I don't know what that is. It had aspirin in it, carbolic acid, sulfur, lanolin, zinc oxide, menthol, and petroleum, and some kind of tar distillate. So it had a lot of ingredients in it, but it worked great. I mean, whatever you had, you put it on, you went to bed the next day, it was gone. And I ordered this. I never heard of this. I thought maybe this would be close. It's called PRID, PRID. It kind of looked like this. But this works because I have a reaction to nickel, and I had a rash, and it worked. Not as good as Pozzolan, but it worked.
Yeah, you were telling me that if you get glasses that have any nickel in the frames, you get a reaction on your skin. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, yeah. And witch hazel works pretty good for that too. Clinical grade. And then this is my dandelion tincture that I make. Dandelions, everybody, so can't wait to get out there and get those dandelions out of their grass. You need to just not do that. You need to make a tea. And this is a tincture. I don't do the onions and sugar that my mother did, but this stuff, if I feel a sniffle or anything, I take a tablespoon of this and it knocks it right out. If you're going to get something.
So you
And then,
remember growing up in the house with all these things, and grandma would just give you this and that for whatever ailed you.
yeah, like I
Yeah.
said, you didn't go to the doctor.
Now, do you remember, like, would her mom do that, or was it more grandpa's mom, or was it all the relatives were like that?
Well, I don't know about, they probably all were. I don't remember. I don't know about my grandma Keating because she died before I was born, but grandma Keating very definitely. In fact, when she was sick and she only doctor she went to was the foot doctor to work on, that's the only doctor she went to.
Like a
And she, like,
skeletal issue, like bunions or whatever, like, that would
yeah,
be it. Like, if you needed any kind of surgical procedure, but otherwise, you didn't go to the doctor.
no, no. And when I was growing up, people didn't. They didn't. Probably because, I don't know, various reasons, but people were not running to the doctor every time you turned around. And I think today, I don't think it's a good thing. I mean, you got to go to the doctor. You have to go if you're in pain or something's not right. But I know when I was working, and I worked 44 years as a nurse and the last 25 in home health. And when I was working, people would get a cold and they'd say, "Oh, I need an antibiotic." And I said, "What for?" And they'd say, "I have a cold." I said, "A cold is a virus. It'll be gone in a week or 10 days. But taking an antibiotic isn't going to do anything for you. But, unless you have an infection like bronchitis or sinusitis. But, people just think it's up here. If I have an antibiotic, I'll get over this. What? No, 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 you can't come up. Tilly hears your voice.
Hi, Tilly girl. I hear you. So, what made you want to go into medicine? What got you down the path of nursing?
Well, when I was, I guess, 10, my mother got very, very ill. It was over Christmas and we had a very cold, I remember that winter. It was really cold. And at our house, if it started snowing, we were out there shoveling. She'd be out there and she'd have me out there and my brother. I don't remember my sisters, but who knows? And we'd be out there shoveling and she was outside in these sub-zero temperatures. And the next thing we know, she was in bed sick as a dog. And the doctor came to the house and told my father that she had to go in the hospital. He couldn't do anything for her. So she was in the hospital for a couple of months and we don't know what it was. I know they treated her with massive doses of steroids. And, when she came home from the hospital, she couldn't walk. She couldn't talk that well. She was like somebody with a stroke. She was so weak. But I took care of her. I mean, I fed her. I did everything that I could. I was only 10, but I did, because I was so afraid that something would happen to her. And she finally got better. She had some residual. She had severe neuropathy in her feet. She lost the eyesight in one eye. I think that was from the steroids, massive doses of cortisone. But, pulled her through and she made it, but she had some, but she lived to be 92, as you know. She a strong lady. But that later on, she thought she had gone to a wake in a funeral home in the town we lived in. And she said several people got sick that were at that funeral home at that time. And she thought she had heard that it was something in the ventilation. Maybe there was a mole or something in the ventilation system. Could be. I don't know. She thought she had Legionnaire's disease, but I don't know if
Well, it's
that's right. But
interesting that they gave her steroids, so it makes me think I'm wondering if it had anything to do with what I've dealt with, like some sort of autoimmune issue.
I do remember going to see her in the hospital. Of course, I was 10, so children weren't allowed in the hospital, but my brother snuck me in for her birthday, which was January 16th. And I remember she didn't even look like my mother. She was all blown up, like she was full of fluid. So her body wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. And maybe she came very close to her kidney shutting down. I don't know. She doesn't really remember too much about it. And I just remember what most 10-year-olds would remember. I was scared. I was scared to death that she would not live because she didn't look like herself. But, she pulled through and she got better.
And grandpa died like a year later, right?
Yeah, my father died a year later.
A lot of stress.
Yeah, a lot of stress, a lot of stress, a lot of stress. But we had, I know when she was in the hospital, and my father was such a pushover, especially for girls, and we all got what we wanted, and we'd been asking for things before my mother got sick, and she said, "No, you can't have that. No, you're too young." Well, Dad got us what we wanted because he thought, well, he didn't think. I remember for me, I wanted this big purse that I could carry my books in, and it was no big deal, but she said, "No, you can carry your briefcase." And I hated a briefcase, things like that. So,
She was the one that ran the household, the money, the finances, and then she goes into the hospital, and grandpa is alone with the four of you, and just basically whatever you asked for, he was gonna get you.
and things went crazy because she came home and she said, "What happened?"
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Because she paid all the bills, she kept the books, she did all that.
Mhm.
She ran the house basically. So she wasn't happy about that. But anyway,
So she comes back and she's able to get her health back to a point where she's able to get back on her feet. And she,
yeah.
with grandpa passing away the next year, she obviously had to do something to start working.
Well, she did. Of course, my brother was like 20 when my father died. He was in college or 21. And I remember him telling me, he said their house was completely paid for. So she didn't really have any, bills other than, your fuel bills and that kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, we didn't have a washer and dryer. She didn't believe in it. We had to go to the laundromat. So she didn't really have a lot of bills, but she had some bills and she didn't work. She didn't work for many years.
She was very frugal.
And then my grandmother came to live with us after my grandfather died. And after a few years, she decided, well, she tried different things. She was going to drive a school bus. Can you imagine my grandma driving a school bus? And she was going to go take the test for it. And my brother, by that time, my brother was teaching. He was an English teacher. He said, "Mother, no, no, you can't drive a school bus."
One, she has no patience for children, or she did not. She did not have patience for little kids. She was a great grandmother for teenagers and college age and beyond, and adult grandchildren. She was fun. But for little kids,
And my brother said, "Absolutely not. You will not be taking this test." And then I remember she sold full of brush stuff. You would go door to door. She dragged me along with her. Yeah, I hated it. I was so embarrassed. So we did the full of brush for a little while, but then one of my aunts, one of my father's sister, said to her, "You need to take the civil service exam for the county." She said, "You'll do fine," because my aunt was working for the county. And so mom was like, well, and a lot of people at that time, it was mid 60s And women secretaries could take a test and become a business teacher for school. But she knew she didn't want to teach. She's not a teacher. So she took the civil service test, passed great, flying colors, and she went to work for social services. And she worked there from the mid to late 60s until she retired at age 65. So, and she did great. She loved it. She became a different woman. And I think she should have been working, but my father would never hear of her working. No, that would not be. But she loved it.
She was very good with giving people advice.
I thank God I had her from my mother. She was very strong. Even when I was an adult and had children of my own, I called her to ask her something. She always would get you on the right track.
No
So,
nonsense. But
no
I mean, she was also nurturing in her own way. She was very religious, grew up Catholic. It's interesting that she was able to meld that almost like a homeopathic mindset for you. So then you were interested in going into that field. Did she like that you wanted to go to nursing school?
She did, because she'd say, "You'll make a good nurse." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know. I'm kind of thinking maybe I'll go be a buyer for Macy's." And she said, "No."
She didn't like that.
No. So she got all the applications and she said, "Fill these out. This is what you're doing." And I never argued with her. And I had been a candy striper, and I also worked as a nurse's aide, through high school. So I didn't hate being around sick people or hospitals, but I was like, yeah, no, I think I want something more glamorous. And she was like, "No, you're going to do this." And she was right. I mean, I worked for 45 years as a nurse, always able to work and make decent money and raise our kids. And so it was the best thing for me. And I don't have any regrets, but she knew, and everybody else, they were all teachers. And I didn't want to be a teacher. I said, "No, I don't want that." Back in the 60s and the early 70s, you were either a teacher or a nurse. If you were a woman, those were your options. So,
Teaching, nursing, secretarial
Mhm.
work. Now,
Mhm.
bookkeeping could have been a thing. I could see grandma would have been a great bookkeeper in
Yeah.
finance or baking or any of that. That would be up her alley too. But social work makes sense because
Well,
she had a servant mindset.
she worked in the Department of Social Services where people came in to get their paychecks, income maintenance. So that's where they would come to get their paychecks. So she did do a bit of bookkeeping, I think, keeping all that straight. But she loved it. She absolutely loved it. And because she had worked before she was married, she worked for the Brooklyn Gas Company and she loved that. And I had said to her later, I said, "Why didn't you?" She said, "Well, I did apply for a job there and they would take me back," because she'd worked there for a number of years. But she would have had to travel into Brooklyn by train. And she just was not physically able to do that at that point in her life. So but she could drive a car,
And
but
she knew her way around the city because I remember when we would get lost, she knew how to get us out.
she did, and she came to see me. She would go in and get on Amtrak, take the train into the city, get on Amtrak, and come down to see me in Raleigh, North Carolina. Now, you and I did that. We got getting on to Amtrak. I don't think I could do that by myself. I think if you
Doing a
hadn't
lot of
been with me,
changing trains and making sure you were paying attention. Yeah. And things change all the time. So she was able to navigate easily.
yeah. So, but then she was raised that way. That was her life growing up. Trains, subways, so that buses, she had no problem with that. It was just that I don't know how she got down to North Carolina. I really don't know how she did it, but she did.
She liked to travel too. She liked
She
public
she did.
transportation.
And she did get to Europe. She went to France. I think she went to Italy. Yeah, Italy and France, because they would have groups from her work and they would all go together. And she loved that. So, and if you think about it, she was blind in one eye and she had neuropathy in her feet and terrible arthritis in her hands, but she didn't let that stop her.
She lived well into her 90s.
92. Yeah. Yeah. Without a partner to help her navigate. Now she was on her own, but she taught me a lot. I mean, as you know, I like to make my own soap. This is tallow, which is fat, animal fat. And the soap but you make it with tallow, and it's very good for your skin. And that's the thing about, and then I know you had somebody on not too long ago that talked about magnesium, and this is my magnesium butter because we all need magnesium.
Yeah. I think everybody in your family was more about the natural. They would do their research or they would know it worked because they'd tried it before. I do want to get into like how you started nursing, then you went on to the homeopathic route more so than Western medicine philosophy. Did grandma always kind of steer you towards the homeopathic, or was it something that you kind of found on your own? I remember going to the pediatrician.
Yes, I did, but we didn't run to the doctor for colds
Not for
or
everything.
rashes and things like that. My daughter-in-law had said to me, "Oh, I was going to the doctor all the time." And I said, "Well," I said, "there's nothing doctors and medicine have made great strides because there are things we can fix today that people died from not too long ago, even in my lifetime. But now, we kind of have to balance that out. Fix the things you can fix because there's so many homeopathic and naturopathic, there are no side effects. You don't have to worry about side effects because it's herbs.
You make like a cayenne salve and magnesium and lavender salve.
Is plantain is probably growing in your yard or along the roads, just like dandelions are. And plantain is not to be confused with the fruit. Plantain, you can put that, make a, just rub it, put it on your hand, someplace that hurts, like a poultice. You can wet the leaves or just lay it on there and it will take the pain away immediately.
I know you gave me a book a while ago. I'm going to get that. A homeopathicary. I know this is a good reference. But if people don't know like what a plant looks like, obviously the internet is going to be a good resource. But you can get a good guide too.
Yeah, I have so many of those reference books, and I go right to them. You have to know your plants, you have to know your herbs, your florals. And my sister is highly allergic to any kind of cream that has flower in it, like primrose. She'll just break out, and she's allergic to penicillin and sulfur. She's allergic to everything. So, but like anything, you have to test it in a small area. But there are lots of recipes out there. I mean, I have books that I've researched and used, and I've gone online. But the bottom line, it's trial and error because we're all different. I mean, I could make a recipe and put it on me and break out in a rash.
Right. What works for you may not work for somebody else in your family either.
Right. So, and the reason I got interested in it, well, one thing, I was raised a certain way, but then you know how the Bath and Body shops were so popular, like when you were growing up, Evelyn and Crabtree, and I loved going in there and
It
buying things,
smells great.
but a lot of those products reacted on me. Like I would use it, and next thing I know, I'd have a rash or I'd be itching. And so that started me trying to figure out what it was that my body didn't like. And so from there, then I just went to what I can safely make for myself. And I don't sell stuff on Etsy or any of that because, nobody, unless you try something, you don't know if you're gonna react to it or not. But,
Yeah. There's so
it's
many
just
allergies that people are susceptible to now. So really it's just doing your research and knowing what you're going to, ingest or put on your skin and make sure it works for you. But
Mhm.
you've done
Yep.
your homework, you know what works for you. But I mean, right now, like you're having a reaction to nickel. You've had a reaction to cinnamon in the past, but I think that changes like every 7 years too, right?
Yeah, I didn't have reaction to cinnamon when I was younger, but now I can't use the spice or the oil because I'll break out. Like some toothpaste, different ones that are really homeopathic, but they have cinnamon oil in them. A lot of them do. And I've had terrible breakouts in my mouth just from that.
So
So,
you have to look really closely at all the labels or make your own stuff.
yep, yep, I got to look
Mhm.
at everything. And, even when you do that, you can still have a reaction.
So you do make your own body creams and salves, your own
Mhm.
soap. You also make your own laundry detergent.
Yeah. And I saw that online and I said, that works really well. That's just, it's all ingredients you can get at the supermarket. A lot of the recipe, you have it in your house. You have apple cider vinegar. I like to use organic oils on my skin, organic olive oil. almond oil, coconut oil, and I have a source where I get that stuff because I can trust it. I've used them for years.
Do you make anything with lavender?
I haven't, but I have lots of lavender in the yard, so I probably need to make some more I had a lot of lavender, but they have a shelf life. So I've just recently gone up in my shelf and got rid of a lot of things that were just years old. They had turned. So they don't last forever, but they should be good, for a year, 2 years at the most.
Or at least a couple of months if you use them regularly. How are your bees? I know you have somebody who has beehives on your property, leasing your land basically. How's that going?
As far as I know, something out there right now. I think it's a deer. The deer get curious once in a while, but the fellows that put the hives up put an electric fence around it, so they they don't get too close.
Because you do have bear on the property, so you want to make sure the bear aren't messing with the beehives.
Right. And bear do come through periodically, and they
Mhm.
usually break my bird feeders. But the bear, I've noticed in the years we've lived here, in the spring is when they're the most active because they've been hibernating, maybe not, and they're hungry,
They're just not as active.
and then when they are, they're eating everything in sight.
Because
They're
there's an apple orchard at the front of the driveway, so they're coming through there to get whatever they can find.
And we only had one incident where they were annoying. The time
They'd go through the
I
trash.
Yeah, they went through the trash. They got in your dad's truck and he hadn't taken the trash off. They made a mess. And you see that around here where the dumpsters are. Periodically they have to move the dumpsters because they're very messy.
Yeah, because anybody who's watching or listening, when you live out in rural parts of at least where we are in Tennessee and Virginia, you usually have to take your trash to a local facility.
Mhm.
We call it the dump, but I think it's a waste transfer facility is where you take your trash once a week, and that's what we do too. So you just have to be mindful of where it is if you have bear or other large critters. Like we have raccoon, and raccoon, they definitely can get into trash too. So you just have to
I'm
be careful
sure.
about where you store your trash when you're out in the rural parts of the northern hemisphere where we are.
Mhm.
So we've talked a little bit about your childhood. We've talked about grandma's influences on your path into the medical field. And now that you're retired, you went through nursing school in New York, and then you became a practicing registered nurse. Then you went back to school to get your bachelor's in nursing, right?
Right. So that's what you did. You went to a nursing school because those were the nurses that got the jobs. And then, I thought about for many years going back but early on, even if you were a nurse and you were practicing and you were working, you still had to take clinicals. And I said, I'm not doing that again. I did that for 3 years and I'm working. Why would I do clinicals? So anyway, and that was the only way you could get your bachelor's was to do those kinds of programs. So you had to do everything all and just to get your 4-year degree. So then they came up with a program here in Virginia through Old Dominion University, and it was just the theory. That's all I had to do was take some of the theory classes.
Yeah, but you had to do some chemistry, didn't you? I remember dad was helping you with chemistry class.
Yes, chemistry and statistics. And I had chemistry in nursing school, but I had to have a year of organic and a year of inorganic. Oh my goodness. So I got my bachelor's.
Continuing education, but I would say your experience on the job was probably more of, you know, your
Well,
education background in the process of nursing itself, right?
for me, I don't think they get the training that we got because we lived in a hospital. We went to school. We went to school all year. We got 2 weeks off in the summer. Other than that, we were working in the hospital and taking classes. And I took college classes along the way then too. But that's the way nurses were trained. You worked in the hospital. That's where you learned how to do everything. And I learned a lot.
Hmm.
I don't think nurses today get that clinical. They get enough, but
Unless
when they
they're
get
in a
out,
hospital setting. I don't know
they are.
if
I
it
mean,
depends.
they go to so many. They go to the thing is weird though because they go to different hospitals. We were in one place and we
Mm.
got everything there. but I went
I
to
do like a rotation.
they do rotation through different hospitals. So these guys and gals had to drive, some of them an hour to get to, their clinical. I mean, for us, all we had to do was roll out of bed, go down through the tunnel, and we were in the hospital. But we got everything, your psych, your peds, your OB, everything. But nowadays, they have to go to different schools, different
But I think it was
hospitals.
your setting too. I mean, you were at what?
Kings County in Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah. So you were all, it was all right there for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that house, it was Kings County, and Downstate Medical was across the street, the medical college. So you saw everything and then some. And it went on for like 9 blocks. I mean, the place was huge, but we got very good training. I
Did
mean,
they ever did they ever blend in any of the Eastern practices or any homeopathic when you were in that setting?
W well, I would say back then, medicine was more holistic than it is today. It was, they dealt with disease from a root cause, where today it's more symptomatic. You have maybe if you have repeated urinary tract infections, they don't try to get to the root cause, they just give you an antibiotic. But when I was training, they looked at things holistically. They didn't just treat symptoms. They tried to get to the root cause.
There are medical doctors and nurses who are practicing in that way, but it sounds like there's definitely been a pendulum maybe going
There's
back to
been a
that now.
swing. If you've ever read, I've read a lot of Edgar Casey's books, and they coined him as the father of holistic medicine. And what holistic means is that you deal with the whole body. You don't compartmentalize. Like, well, the kidneys are here, the liver is here. I mean, yes, they're in different parts of your body, but they all work together. And if something's not working, they used to try to figure out why. Why aren't they working together? Because our bodies are amazing.
Functional medicine is that blending of the Eastern and Western, right? It's the more holistic.
Well, probably. I think holistic simply means that we're looking at the whole system. And I think both of those ways of looking at disease are like in that manner. They don't look at things being separate because they're not. Dandelions, for instance, actually break down if you have crystals in your urine, which can lead to kidney stones, break down the crystals, dandelion tea.
So it's proactive if you're prone to kidney stone.
Yep. It'll keep those crystals from forming because if they form and eventually they form stones, well, then you have a problem. And, even just a dandelion is rich in vitamin A, C, K, and E, calcium and iron, potassium, and magnesium. So plantain is known as the green healer. So there's just, I mean, you could go on forever with herbs. They all have some sort of medicinal property. And that was the way, that was holistic back in the 17, 18, early 1900s. And also healing with crystals. I won't get into crystals because that's a whole other thing, but there is some benefit, and crystals come from Mother Earth. They're all earthly products.
Organic materials.
And that's what our body does not do well with vaccines and things that are made synthetically. I mean, I'm not saying that vaccines are bad. I'm just saying that when you get away from natural products and things that your body, and it's true of food too, I mean, your body probably breaks butter down a lot better than it does margarine because it recognizes the butter. It recognizes that it's, natural. Margarine isn't. It's chemical, my theory. That's just the way I see things.
Well, the way that grandma raised you, it obviously trickled down to this generation because I am one that would rather have butter than margarine. I'm one that would rather have regular sugar than a synthetic. I don't like diet drinks because they give me headaches. That whatever's in them, saccharin or whatever it is, the fake sugar, the fake sweeteners, the chemical sweeteners, they give me a headache. Cause that's how I've been raised. That's how I operate. I tend to go natural and organic as much as I can. And that does mean full fat. And and that's okay because fat is good for you in moderation.
There are good fats. There are good fats, there are bad fats. But
Yeah.
and like you say, in moderation, everything is a balancing act.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have a garden, and that's great because If you grow your own food, it's certainly better than what you would get at the grocery store.
Or if you have neighbors who grow greens for you. Thank you, neighbors
Yeah.
out there listening.
Yeah.
So, but and that's the thing too,
Lucky
it's
you.
community. Yes, but it's about a community. If you can find a local bakery that makes fresh sourdough bread, and then you have a gardener or a farmer down the road that has fresh vegetables that are organic and they don't use pesticides, then you want to know those people.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like where I get the fat, I get it from the local, I
Dairy.
call 'em local well, local dairy, but also the local butcher. I call Woods Cold Storage the local butcher
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
they have a locker there and their fats and things are come from grass fed animals.
You know where they're coming from.
Yeah. You know
Yeah.
where your food's coming from. When you
Mhm.
buy and not everybody can do that, but if you can, it's certainly the better way to go.
Yeah. Yep.
And it tastes better. We had chickens for a while and those eggs were wonderful. They tasted so much better than what you get in the store. So,
Yeah, and side note, the reason why they don't is because they were eaten. Predators got to them. But, if you can sustain and maintain and keep the chickens, they're
yeah,
gonna
because
be
I thought they should be
fine.
able to free range during the day. Well, it turns out that's not such a good thing.
It doesn't work with fox and other predators. No. But so wrapping up our conversation, thinking about all the influences you had since you were little up until now, would you say that you come from a long line of healers? Do you believe that there was that kind of oral tradition passed down? Or do you feel like you've just kind of taken pieces from what grandma did and aunts and uncles and just kind of fashioned it to fit your
Well, I
lifestyle?
I wish I had known my father's mother. Well, his father died. He was only 20 when his father died, so his father died young. But I would have liked to have known my grandma Keating. From what I understand, she was a very sweet woman, and I think she was maybe operated that way too. I don't know, but my grandma Cooney certainly did because she didn't. Even when my grandfather was sick, she had a fear of hospitals.
Mm,
She just didn't trust hospitals. She had all the kids at home.
yeah,
And
yeah.
she took care of my grandfather when he was in the last stages of his disease. She took care of him at home. So I think I saw that in action. And I never saw her. She had congestive heart failure. Now we know that she died in 1969. I think in the 60s, they probably could have treated her somewhat, but she didn't go to the doctor. And it was hard to watch her struggle with that, but, that's the way.
And she died at home. She died.
And I always tell this funny story when some of my friends and I were in high school and we were upstairs in my bedroom. We decided we were going to have a cigarette. So we had the bedroom window open and we were puffing out and my grandmother was downstairs on the couch. And one of my friends said, "Aren't you afraid your grandmother's going to smell that?" And I said, "Oh, she can't get off the couch without help." Well, lo and behold, she not only got off that couch, she was almost at the top of the stairs. And I could hear her saying, "Babs," because she called me Babs, "Babs." And I went, "Oh, Lord, where is she?" I opened the door and I said, "Grandma, what are you doing?" She said, "What's that smell?" I said, "Oh, I don't know. I don't know. We got the window open. I don't know." I said, "Let me help you back to the couch." She was no dummy. She knew what we were doing. So
Which is interesting because she sounded just like Grandma Keating there, just
she
like her
was
mother
But
or her
she was
daughter.
yeah, she won't she came to live with us and we just adored her. My younger cousins always said, "Yeah, grandma wasn't really good with us when we were little." So maybe mom got
Yeah,
that from my grand from
she was better with
I
the
mean,
older
I
grandchildren than
thought she
younger.
was wonderful. But,
Mm,
even when I was like 5 or 6, and she gave me the best birthday and Christmas presents. Always a great big baby doll with clothes to match and furniture and all that kind of stuff. But
mm,
maybe she didn't do it for the others, I don't know.
maybe.
I don't know. I mean, she was sweet, and I said, "Well, grandma was sweet," and my cousins will say, "Yeah, she was sweet, but she didn't interact with us," and I'd say, one of my cousin families, there's like 6 of them. I said, "Because you're all wild. You probably scared her to half to death." But, with us, she was like having another mom, and she was the
Mm,
one that would always comfort you, and as my sister says, when she was getting married and my mother was no, you're going to have this, you're going to have that. We're not going to do this. And my grandmother said to my mother, give her whatever she wants, whatever she wants. I'll pay for it. So she was that kind of woman.
Sweet. Okay. So any final thoughts, Mom, before I let you go for this 100th episode?
Well, this has been fun, and it's nice to talk about the way medicine has changed even over 100 years. I think we've gone from holistic or naturopathic to something else, and now we're returning back. I think people are realizing that natural antibiotics are better than synthetic. It may take longer to respond, but they're better for your body because your body recognizes it.
And it is ancient practice. This is not something that has just been made up in the last 100 years. This is what
True.
our ancestors used wherever. And usually what they say is everything you need is right out in your backyard. You just need to know how to find it and use it.
That's right. But over the 100 years, we saw things were working fine, maybe not as quick as we wanted, but then we went to synthetics, petroleum products and things like that. And then, we healed quicker and it was fast, instant gratification, but, maybe not so good in the long run. So now we're going back to the old ways.
And I think also we've also introduced a lot of more, chemicals into our diet, if you think about it, because, 100 years ago, we didn't have a lot of the products that we have on the shelves nowadays. We didn't have diet sodas and fast food and all the things like that. So, we've introduced a lot of foreign substances into our system.
Right. That are sprayed with God knows what. In fact, your father did a Zoom call today. He did a spiel on regenerative farming, and farmers are going back to that. And that was a practice that was done hundreds of years ago. And farmers are realizing that they need to get back to that.
Yeah. And for sustaining a lifestyle that we want to live with less frequent visits to the doctor, I'm going to go to the doctor if I break something. I'm going to need medical care if I break something or I need a surgery for major issues. But for a cold, no, I don't need to go get an antibiotic. And while I might want a Z-Pack, I know that it's not going to help me. And it's just going to, I might be able to breathe better, but there are other ways you can deal with those symptoms.
And eventually it won't work because we've abused antibiotics. And so then we get superbugs because they're resistant to the antibiotics that we have because we've overused them. But you're right. I mean, thank God for orthopedic surgeons. And I mean, I've certainly had my share of broken bones, and thank God for those people, and your father just had his knee replaced and he's doing beautifully and he's not in pain anymore. So, medicine has made huge advancements, but they had not made advancements with chronic problems, I don't think.
Yeah. There are things that we can take from the ancients and our ancient wisdom and practices from generations past. And really, in our experience, it's only like 2 generations ago it was more commonplace. So we can really think back to, grandma's elixir isn't going to be so bad if you think about what worked and didn't work.
Right. And well, you said we aren't spraying the fields that we farm with the chemicals that we do today. And that's why I'm thankful for the regenerative farming. They're getting back to the old ways. So maybe that will help. And, also there's the processed food. Who needs to eat processed food?
It's not good for you. And it's empty calories and it doesn't taste that great either.
No, it's not good for you. So yeah, we're learning. Maybe the next generation will be smarter.
And just, embracing some old practices and do a refresh. So the old is new again.
That's right. That's right. Well, it's been fun chatting with you.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for today's episode of Go Slow to Go Fast Lifestyle Podcast. Yes, 100 episodes. I'm very excited. Thank you for being here. If you're still here listening, that means something resonated with you. So I hope that you've already subscribed. And if you haven't, I hope you take a moment to do so. And please share with someone you know, because the light in me honors the light in you. And as you head into the rest of your week, let your light shine through. Go slow to go fast. And thanks for listening.